Prologue. They rejected him 23 times. Not because King Ronan Draven was cruel, but because he was too much, too scarred, too silent, too dangerous to approach. The most feared alpha in the realm, a warrior whose name made armies tremble and women look away in terror. Tonight, everything changes. A bleeding Omega stumbles into the storm-lashed courtyard of Stormville Fortress, hunted and desperate, expecting death. Instead, the monster they all whisper about does the unthinkable. He protects her. And for the first time in his brutal life, someone looks at him without fear. Stay until the end to see how an outcast king destroys everyone who underestimated him. The storm struck the capital like a hammer through iron. Rain lashed the black stone walls of Stormville Fortress in relentless sheets, so thick the guards on the battlements could barely see their own spears. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the ancient towers for a split second before plunging everything back into roaring darkness. Thunder shook the very foundations of the keep. King Ronan Draven stood alone in his private inner courtyard, unmoved by the downpour. Water streamed down his sharp, battle-hardened face. He didn't flinch when lightning cracked dangerously close. At 34 years old and 12 years into his reign, he had faced far worse than a storm. His broad shoulders strained against his soaked tunic. Scars crisscrossed his powerful forearms, some earned in war, others from darker memories he never spoke of. His steel-gray eyes stared into the night. 23 rejections. The number sat heavy in his chest like a cold blade. Each Omega who had stood before the court, taken one look at him, and whispered, "I cannot," had become another scar on his soul. The latest, Lady Marin, had trembled as she said it. "You're simply too much, Your Majesty." Ronan had nodded, dismissed her with quiet dignity, and walked away. But that night, in the silence of his chambers, the loneliness pressed against his ribs until it hurt to breathe. Lightning flashed again. In that brilliant white instant, he saw her. A small, drenched figure collapsed against the far wall of the courtyard, leaving a dark trail of blood on the ancient stones. She should not have been able to enter. The gates were locked and heavily guarded. Ronan moved without thinking. In 4 powerful strides he was beside her, dropping to one knee in the pouring rain. She was tiny compared to him, wrapped in torn rags that had once been a dress. Blood mixed with rainwater flowed from wounds on her shoulder and side. Her breathing was ragged. Even through the storm, he caught her scent, sweet Omega warmth beneath the copper of blood. She lifted her head. Bruises marred her left cheek, her lip was split, and her dark eyes were glazed with pain. But when her gaze focused on him, she didn't scream. Instead, she whispered one word. "Please." Chapter 1. Ronan crossed the courtyard in 4 long strides, rain forgotten as he knelt beside the collapsed figure. She was far smaller than him, shivering in soaked rags that clung to her battered form. Blood flowed freely from a deep gash on her shoulder and another along her ribs, mixing with the storm water pooling on the stones. He checked her injuries with the practiced hands of a warrior who had tended countless battlefield wounds. The cuts were serious but not immediately fatal. When she lifted her head again, her dark eyes met his without the usual terror. "Please," she whispered once more, voice barely cutting through the thunder. Something shifted inside Ronan's chest. "You're safe now," he growled, his voice rough like gravel. He slid his arms beneath her carefully, one under her knees, the other supporting her back, and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. She instinctively pressed closer to his warmth, her forehead resting against his collarbone. "What's your name?" he asked while carrying her toward the private entrance of the East Tower. "Elara," she breathed against his neck. "Hold on, Elara, I've got you." He kicked open the inner door, startling the 2 guards posted inside. Their eyes widened at the sight of their king carrying a bleeding stranger. "Send for healer Myra immediately," Ronan ordered. "My private chambers. Double the guards around the courtyard. No one enters or leaves without my direct word." The guards rushed to obey. Ronan carried Elara through the dimly lit corridors of Stormville Fortress, past ancient tapestries and portraits of long-dead rulers. His chambers occupied the entire East Tower, chosen for their isolation. He laid her gently on the massive bed built for his size, and moved to stoke the dying fire in the hearth. Why are you helping me? Elara asked weakly, watching him from the bed. Ronan turned, the firelight casting harsh shadows across his scarred face. Because you asked. She studied him for a long moment, her gaze steady despite the pain. They say you're a monster, too dangerous for anyone to touch. They aren't wrong, he replied quietly. But you're not like the real monsters I've met, she said, certainty in her voice. You're just big, strong, and you didn't hesitate. Healer Myra arrived soon after, her expression all business as she shooed Ronan to the side, but allowed him to stay in the room. For the next hour, Ronan watched as the healer cleaned and stitched the wounds. Elara bit down on a leather strap to stay silent, her resilience impressive. She'll need rest, at least a week, possibly more, Myra announced finally. These injuries are no joke. She'll have everything she needs, Ronan said. After the healer left, Ronan pulled a chair beside the bed and sat vigil as Elara drifted into exhausted sleep. The storm outside softened to steady rain. For the first time in years, the crushing loneliness in his chest felt a fraction lighter. Dawn crept in hours later. Elara stirred and opened her eyes to find him still there. You stayed, she murmured. I said I would. A knock interrupted them. One of the guards announced that Lord Varian requested an urgent audience. Ronan dismissed the request coldly, prioritizing Elara's safety. When he returned with food, they spoke more openly. She revealed fragments of her ordeal, 3 months fleeing traffickers who had taken her, and others from border villages. Ronan's fists clenched. Give me names, they will never touch anyone again. As the morning progressed, tension built. Lord Varian, Ronan's ambitious cousin, eventually forced his way into a confrontation in the receiving hall, questioning the presence of the unknown Omega and warning of political consequences. Ronan stood firm, his alpha presence filling the room like a storm. What happens in my tower is my concern. She stays under my protection. The Monster King has taken in a wounded Omega, defying his court and his own painful past. But with enemies already circling and secrets beginning to surface, how long can this fragile safety last? Will trust bloom between them, or will the shadows of the kingdom tear them apart? Chapter 2. Ronan returned to his chambers after dealing with Lord Varian's insistent demands, finding Elara sitting up in the large bed with a blanket draped over her shoulders. She had managed to wash away some of the dried blood, her dark hair still damp and falling in waves around her face. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, casting a soft glow over the stone walls of the east tower. You came back, she said, her voice steadier than before. Did you think I wouldn't? Ronan replied, moving to the side table where servants had left a tray of bread, cheese, and preserved fruits. He brought it to her, sitting on the edge of the bed. I don't know what to think about any of this. About you. She took the food carefully, eating slowly as if unused to having enough. Everyone whispers that you're too intense, too scarred from battles no one else survived. But you haven't treated me like a burden. He watched her, his steel-gray eyes softening slightly. I've killed men with these hands, burned villages in wars that united the fractured lands under my rule. Being big and dangerous is all I've known. It seems to scare everyone away. For cowards, maybe, Elara said, meeting his gaze without flinching. I've seen true monsters, the ones who smile while breaking people. You're not that. You're protection when I needed it most. The words landed heavily in Ronan's chest, cracking open years of isolation. They talked for hours as the rain continued outside, her sharing fragments of her 3 months in captivity. Traffickers had taken her and 12 other Omegas from remote villages, promising safety but delivering chains and horror. The leader was a powerful southern noble, Duke Harlan, with connections that reached deep into the court. Ronan listened, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. Names, details, I will end this. Why risk your throne for me? She asked quietly. Because you looked at me and saw a man, not a weapon. That's rarer than any crown. 3 days passed in a tense rhythm. Elara healed faster than expected, her Omega strength returning with rest and care from healer Myra. Ronan fortified the tower's defenses, calling on loyal border commanders through encrypted messages. But shadows loomed. Lord Varian's spies were everywhere. questioning the unknown Omega in the king's isolated quarters. One midnight, a sharp knock woke Ronan from his desk, where he reviewed patrol reports. A guard, pale-faced, reported a small fire in the south wing and Varian probing security protocols. Ronan rushed back to find Elara safe in the window seat, a book in her lap. Her smile faded at his expression. "We need to talk about who is truly hunting you," he said, closing the door firmly. Elara's face closed off at first, but she eventually revealed the full horror. Duke Harlan supplied Omegas to wealthy alphas for control and pleasure. She had witnessed ledgers, faces, and atrocities. Worse, she had killed 2 of his men with a kitchen knife to save a 14-year-old girl from the same fate. Self-defense, but it painted her as a fugitive. Ronan dropped to one knee, eye level with her. "That wasn't murder, that was justice. You stay, we face this together." Before she could respond, the door burst open. Lord Varian entered with guards, his handsome face twisted in feigned concern. "Your Majesty, an unidentified Omega wanted for murder. This endangers the realm." Ronan positioned himself protectively. "She is under my shield. Leave." Varian smirked, pulling out documents. "Duke Harlan demands her return. The council will have questions." The tension crackled like the storm outside. Ronan's alpha dominance filled the room, forcing Varian to step back. "This is my domain. Challenge me at your peril." After Varian retreated with veiled threats, Elara trembled. "I'm a liability. I should go." "No," Ronan said, pulling her close for the first time with intent. "We fight together." Their foreheads touched, a charged moment neither named yet. But deeper dangers brewed. Varian's plans were already in motion, and the spring feast loomed where everything would collide. The Monster King had found his reason to stand, but the court vipers were sharpening their fangs. Chapter 3. The days leading to the spring ceremonial feast passed in a whirlwind of preparations and quiet tension within the East Tower. Ronan spent hours coordinating with trusted commanders from the northern borders, sending coded messages and repositioning loyal guards throughout Stormville Fortress. Elara recovered rapidly, her wounds closing under healer Myra's care, though faint scars would remain as reminders of her ordeal. She moved with purpose now, no longer the broken fugitive but a determined survivor sharpening knives and studying maps of the palace layout. "This feast is a trap," she warned one evening as they shared a meal by the fire. "Varian will use it to strike publicly." "Then we face it head-on," Ronan replied, his voice low. "No more hiding, you stand beside me." She had chosen a striking gown of deep forest green for the occasion, one that highlighted her strength rather than fragility, the fabric shimmering like leaves after rain. Ronan wore his battle-worn armor beneath formal robes, a silent reminder of the warrior king beneath the crown. As they descended to the grand hall together, the air hummed with anticipation and hostility. Hundreds of candles flickered across vaulted ceilings, long tables laden with roasted game, spiced wines, and seasonal fruits from every province. Nobles filled the space like shadows, their conversations dying as the pair entered. Whispers spread like wildfire, the fugitive Omega seated at the king's side, in the queen's ancient chair no less. Lord Varian approached with polished charm, his golden hair catching the light, eyes sharp as daggers. "Cousin, how bold. An unvetted guest in such a place of honor." Ronan's hand rested protectively near Elara's. "She is my guest. Any issue with that?" Varian's smile tightened. Tradition demands a formal presentation for any Omega under consideration, especially after recent events. The feast unfolded with courses and toasts, but the undercurrent of danger never faded. After the third course, Varian rose, clinking his goblet for silence. "Honored lords and ladies, tonight we honor ancient customs. Our king has searched for a mate for 12 long years. Tonight, we evaluate this newcomer openly." Gasps rippled through the hall. Elara's hand tightened on Ronan's arm, but she stood tall as he led her to the central platform. Questions flew from council elders. Her humble origins as a blacksmith's daughter, her lack of courtly training, her admission of killing traffickers to protect a child. The crowd murmured in outrage and fascination. Varian pressed harder. "What do you truly offer the realm, beyond a tale of survival?" Elara's eyes blazed with defiance. I offer truth in a court drowning in lies. I see the man behind the scars, not the monster you all fear. He is strength for protection, not domination. That is rarer than any alliance or dowry. Ronan stepped forward, his presence commanding the entire hall. For 12 years I accepted your judgments and rejections. No more. Elara is under my protection, by her choice and mine. She stays as companion, equal, not prize. Claim her I do, openly. The declaration shook the room. Varian recovered with a cutting smile. A formal claim invokes the old laws. Consummation must seal it within 7 days, or it dissolves and leaves her exposed. Elara stiffened beside him, fury flashing in her dark eyes. The feast ended in chaos as they retreated to the tower. Once alone, she yanked her hand free. You claimed me without asking. 7 days to bind me forever or lose everything. You took my choice, just like every alpha before. Ronan reached for her, regret heavy in his chest. I was trying to shield you from them. Shielding or controlling? Her voice cracked. I survived chains. I won't wear new ones, even gilded. She demanded space and stormed to the far side of the chambers. Ronan stood frozen, the weight of his decision crashing down. Before he could find words to mend the rift, a scream echoed from the outer hall. He drew his blade and charged, finding 3 shadowy intruders surrounding Elara, one pressing a knife to her throat. Rage turned his vision sharp. In a blur of motion, Ronan disarmed the first with a savage strike, throwing the second into the stone wall. Elara grabbed a fallen dagger and held it steady against the last attacker's neck. Guards flooded in moments later, as the fight ended in blood and silence. Healer Myra arrived swiftly, tending Elara's fresh bruises. Ronan pulled her close afterward, foreheads touching. I was wrong. We find another way. Change the law if we must. Your choice always. She searched his face, tears and fire mixing. Prove it. No more decisions for me. As they held each other, Varian's letter arrived via a messenger, mocking their bond and promising the real storm was yet to come. The 7 days had begun, but so had the deeper conspiracy. Chapter 4. The following morning brought a fragile calm to the East Tower, but the 7-day clock weighed heavily on both of them. Ronan reviewed reports from his security head, Commander Thorne, revealing that the captured attackers had been paid to be caught, deliberately naming a council elder as a distraction. The real threat still lurked deeper. Elara, now dressed in practical leathers with hidden blades, insisted on joining strategy sessions. Equal partners means I fight beside you, not hide in silk. They entered the council chamber together, where Ronan deliberately played the role of the unstable ruler, demanding loyalty oaths and immediate arrests connected to Duke Harlan. The nobles shifted uneasily, some whispering of tyranny while Varian sat quietly, offering moderate counsel that masked his satisfaction. Ronan watched his cousin carefully, noting how little the accusations rattled him. Later, healer Myra pulled Ronan aside in a shadowed corridor near the healing wards. I rechecked the records. There was another Omega treated here days before Elara arrived, under Varian's orders. Dark hair, similar build. It matches too perfectly. Doubt crept into Ronan's mind like frost on steel. Could Elara have been planted? Her timely arrival, her words that pierced his armor so easily, had it all been crafted? He returned to the chambers with a storm in his eyes, only to find them empty. No struggle, just a single note on the pillow. I'm sorry. I tried to warn you, but it's too late. Cass, Varian has what he needs now. I never meant to care this much. Rage and betrayal froze Ronan solid. He summoned guards and ordered a full search. When they located her in the ancient archives, poring over dusty ledgers, he had her brought to the throne room under watch, a public space heavy with torchlight and echoing stone. Elara entered fighting with words, not fists. Ronan, listen, Varian has been planning this for years. I found proof in the old scrolls. Silence, he commanded from the throne, voice like thunder. You played me. The perfect broken Omega crashing into my life exactly when I was weakest. Her face paled. That's not true. The note was if something happened to me. He descended the steps, gripping her chin. Duke Harlan, the medical entry, your knowledge of the ring, all arranged by Varian to make me weak. What did he promise you? Tears streamed down her cheeks as she slapped his hand away. I loved you, you fool. Every word, every touch was real. But you're so convinced no one could want the monster that you believe the first lie that fits. Healer Myra burst in moments later, breathless. The records were altered. The earlier Omega entry was planted to sow doubt. I was wrong, Ronan. It was a trap. The revelation hit like a warhammer. Ronan released Elara as if burned. Elara, But the damage was done. She stepped back, voice hollow. You chose suspicion over me the moment it was easy. I survived hell only to be broken here by the one person I trusted. She turned and walked out, spine straight despite the tears, leaving Ronan shattered in the empty throne room. Before he could pursue her, guards reported chaos in the Great Hall. Duke Harlan had arrived openly, smiling as he surrendered. I'm here to confess everything, he announced to the assembled court. But the real traitor is closer than you think. Records show King Ronan's involvement in his own father's poisoning. Varian has the proof. The council convened immediately. Varian, seated in the king's position, invoked ancient charters. For the good of the realm, you are suspended pending full investigation. I will serve as regent. Ronan unbuckled his sword and laid it down without fight, extracting only one promise: protection for Elara. Escorted back to his locked chambers, he sank onto the bed where her scent still lingered. The Monster King had been dethroned not by blades, but by his own shattered trust. A soft scrape at the window made him look up. Elara slipped inside, bloodied from her climb but eyes fierce. We don't have time for apologies. Varian strikes at the feast tonight. Listen to what I found in the archives. Chapter 5. Elara dropped into the chamber from the window ledge, her clothes torn and streaked with blood from the difficult climb along the outer walls of the east tower. Ronan moved toward her instantly, but she raised a hand, eyes burning with urgency. Not mine, mostly, save the apologies. Varian plans to end this at tonight's ceremonial feast. We have less than 3 hours. Healer Myra slipped in through the door moments later, having bribed the outer guards with promises of future favor. The three of them gathered around the heavy oak desk, maps of Stormville Fortress spread under flickering lantern light. Elara traced the storage vaults beneath the grand hall where Varian's private wine casks waited. He laced them with an alpha rage compound. It strips control, turns you into the beast they all fear. You drink it, slaughter the court in front of witnesses, and Varian emerges as the savior who puts you down. Myra set a small vial on the table. I tested a sample. Colorless, fast-acting, we replace the casks with clean stock from your northern reserves. My loyal servants will handle service, watching every goblet. Ronan nodded, his strategist mind already calculating. 20 to 30 allies at most, not enough for open battle but enough to expose him. We force his hand publicly. Elara's gaze met his, still guarded but resolute. No more lone heroics. We do this as partners or not at all. They refined the plan in hushed voices. Servants swapping barrels in the dim vaults, positioned allies creating clear sightlines, Elara moving through the crowd as a minor attendant to monitor reactions. Ronan would play the suspended king, compliant yet watchful. As the sun dipped low, painting the stone corridors in blood-red hues, they separated. Elara kissed him once, fierce and brief. Trust me this time. The grand hall glowed under thousands of candles when Ronan entered under escort, the air thick with roasted meats, spiced aromas, and underlying fear. Nobles watched him with wary eyes as he took his isolated seat. Varian presided from the head, radiant in deep crimson robes, raising his goblet. To truth and new beginnings. Goblet circulated. Ronan accepted his but set it aside until Elara appeared at his side with a different cup. From your personal northern cellars, your majesty, tradition demands it. Varian's smile faltered for a split second as murmurs spread. Ronan drank deeply. The wine tasted clean, steadying his blood instead of igniting it. The feast dragged on with forced conversation until Varian stood again. It pains me, but evidence against the former king cannot be ignored. Poison in his father's veins. Records of secret dealings. For the realm's stability, the investigation must proceed. Ronan rose slowly. Convenient evidence from a slaver you control. He signaled subtly. Curtains along the walls drew back, revealing his hidden guards. Elara stepped into the light holding yellowed documents. The real records from the archives. Letters between you and Duke Harlan spanning 15 years. Plans to weaken the king with a carefully chosen Omega. The girl before me, Lisa, took her own life rather than betray him. Myra joined her, voice clear. Medical proof of the old king's poisoning from your private stores. The altered records were your doing. Varian's mask shattered. Lies, he is the monster here, too scarred and brutal to rule. He grabbed his goblet and hurled it at the wall, wine splashing like accusation. You think this changes anything? The court fears you, not me. Elara moved to Ronan's side, taking his hand publicly. I love him, not for power or perfection, but because he chooses to be better than the weapon they forged. He protects instead of conquers. That is the king this realm needs. Voices rose in support from Lord Vane and Lady Meredith, calling for Varian's arrest and Ronan's reinstatement. Varian drew his sword, eyes wild. Then prove what you are, cousin. Fight me. Ronan stepped forward unarmed, voice steady as mountain stone. I could kill you now and prove them right, but I choose mercy. Drop the blade. Face justice as the law demands, not my fists. For a long breath the hall held its silence. Varian's sword trembled, then clattered to the floor. Guards seized him as the nobles erupted in chaos. Ronan addressed the room with quiet authority. The feast ends. Trials and reforms begin at dawn. As the hall emptied, Elara squeezed his hand. The immediate threat was broken, but the 7-day bond still loomed and deeper wounds between them remained. Chapter 6. In the quiet aftermath of the Grand Hall, with spilled wine and scattered plates marking the battlefield of words rather than blades, Ronan and Elara stood alone amid the flickering candle remnants. The weight of the evening pressed down like the mountain mists surrounding Stormville Fortress. We need to talk, he said softly, guiding her toward a smaller antechamber where moonlight filtered through narrow arched windows. Elara pulled away gently but firmly. The claim still hangs over us. 7 days to seal it or lose everything. You made that choice in front of the entire court without asking what I wanted. Ronan bowed his head, the scars on his face more pronounced in the pale light. I was trying to shield you from Varian's schemes, but I see now how it trapped you instead. I'm sorry. She crossed her arms, voice steady despite the exhaustion. I survived 3 months of chains and fear. I won't trade one form of control for another, even if it comes from you. After a long pause, she added, I need time. Space to decide who I am beyond running and surviving. Beyond being the Omega who fell at the Monster King's feet. He removed the heavy iron chain bearing the royal seal from around his neck and pressed it into her hands. This grants you full legal autonomy and protection, independent of any bond or claim. Stay or go as you choose. I want you here because you decide it freely, not because tradition or danger forces it. Tears glistened in her eyes as she clutched the chain. You're giving me power over the king himself. I'm giving you freedom, he replied. I love you, Elara, but love without choice isn't love, it's another cage. She kissed him then, slow and bittersweet, tasting of salt and hope. I'm not leaving forever, just long enough to breathe. I'll stay with healer Myra for now and work with the freed Omegas from Harlan's ring. They need voices who understand. Ronan nodded, respecting her boundary even as it ached. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, rebuilding what was broken. The next weeks blurred into a storm of justice and change across the fortress and surrounding realms. Varian's public trial exposed every layer of his conspiracy, the poisoning of the old king, the trafficking network with Duke Harlan, the planted evidence and manipulated records. Testimonies from survivors and hidden documents Elara had uncovered sealed his fate. He was stripped of all titles, exiled to the frozen northern wilds under constant guard, his name erased from royal lineages. Duke Harlan and his allies faced similar reckonings. The trafficking routes were dismantled, victims given sanctuary and new beginnings in protected border villages. Ronan pushed through sweeping reforms, outlawing forced alpha claims, establishing oversight councils with commoner representation, and creating healing centers for those scarred by the old ways. He worked late into the nights in the war room, maps and decrees spread under lantern glow, determined that no one else would suffer as Elara had. Yet every evening he returned to the empty East Tower, where her scent still faintly lingered on the pillows. The loneliness returned, but felt different now, tempered by purpose and the quiet hope that she might return when ready. 3 months later, as spring blossoms fought through the last patches of mountain snow in the private courtyard, Ronan stood alone among the new flower beds Elara had once spoken of planting. Footsteps approached on the stone path. He turned to see her there, dressed in simple traveling clothes, hair longer and eyes clearer, carrying the quiet strength of someone who had faced her ghosts. "Hi," she said, a small smile breaking through. "Hi," his heart thundered as she stepped closer. "I've been helping Myra with the survivors, learning who I am when I'm not running or hiding." She reached out, touching the chains still around her neck. "I figured out what I want. Not out of fear or debt, but because you're stubborn, honorable, and you let me choose. I want this, us, on our terms." Ronan pulled her into his arms, the embrace fierce yet tender. "Are you certain?" "Completely. No more 7-day deadlines or old laws. We build something new." They kissed under the open sky, the courtyard where blood and rain had once mixed now alive with color and promise. The monster king and the wounded Omega had found their way back, ready to face whatever came next as true equals. Chapter 7. The bonding ceremony took place 1 week later in the transformed private courtyard of Stormville Fortress, where spring flowers now bloomed vibrantly over the once blood-stained stones. No grand audience of nobles filled the space this time, only healer Myra officiating under a clear mountain sky and Commander Thorn as witness. Soft winds carried the scent of pine from the surrounding peaks, and lanterns hung from iron posts cast a warm, golden light as dusk settled. Ronan stood tall in simple dark formal attire, his scars visible but no longer hidden. Elara approached in a flowing gown of soft earth tones, practical yet elegant, the royal seal chain still around her neck like a symbol of her freedom. They had written their own vows, discarding the ancient alpha dominance rituals. "I promise to trust you fully," Ronan said, taking both her hands in his larger ones. "To listen when doubt creeps in, to stand as your equal in every decision, and to choose partnership over protection when it matters most." Elara's eyes shone with quiet strength. "I promise to challenge you when needed, to believe in the man behind the warrior's mask, and to choose you each day, not out of obligation, but because our shared path feels right. No cages, only open roads together." The bond settled between them like a gentle dawn warmth, permanent yet born of free will. Myra smiled softly as she completed the simple rites. "You two have already rewritten more laws than most kings manage in a lifetime. May this hold." In the following months, their joint rule began reshaping the kingdom. Elara became his closest advisor, bringing perspectives from the border villages and survivor communities that the old court had long ignored. She sat beside him in council sessions, fiercely debating policies on Omega rights and trafficking prevention. Ronan listened, sometimes arguing back, but always adjusting course when her insight cut through old habits. There were conflicts, of course. Late nights in the war room overlooking the misty valleys often turned heated when Ronan leaned too heavily on military solutions. "You still think like a weapon sometimes," she would say, arms crossed. He would concede, pulling her close, "Then remind me how to be a man instead." The reforms spread steadily. New healing centers opened in the southern provinces, protected trade routes dismantled the last remnants of Harlan's network, and council seats now included voices from common folk. Slowly, the whispers about the monster king shifted to tales of a ruler who had learned mercy and strength through partnership. On their first bonding anniversary, as they walked the flower-filled courtyard under starlit skies, Elara leaned against him. "Remember the storm that brought me here? I thought it was the end. Instead, it was the beginning." Ronan kissed the top of her head. "You crashed into my isolation and made me human again. Every scar feels different now, proof we survived." Their bond deepened through shared trials and quiet joys. Nightmares still came for both, his of endless rejections, hers of chains, but they faced them together, hands clasped until dawn broke over the mountains. Chapter 8. Years unfolded across the shadowed peaks and fertile valleys surrounding Stormville Fortress, bringing a hard-won stability to the realm under Ronan and Elara's shared guidance. The once feared monster king now walked the halls with his bonded partner at his side, their partnership a living challenge to every old tradition of dominance. Elara had become a formidable force in her own right, heading initiatives that established safe havens for Omegas across the Southern Territories, where mountain mists often carried whispers of new beginnings rather than fear. Their days filled with council debates in the sunlit Grand Chamber overlooking misty ridges, where Elara would push back against Ronan's instinct for swift military action. Strength isn't always a blade, she reminded him during one heated session about border disputes. Sometimes it's the bridge we build so no one else has to run through storms. He would pause, steel-gray eyes meeting hers, then adjust the decrees accordingly, earning quiet respect from even the most skeptical lords. Nights, however, still tested them. Ronan would wake from dreams of endless empty thrones and 23 cold rejections, his broad frame tense until Elara's hand found his in the darkness. "You're not alone anymore," she would whisper, her voice a steady anchor. In turn, when old memories of chains and traffickers pulled her from sleep with shallow breaths, he held her close, his presence a silent vow that no shadow would claim her again. They faced the fractures together, turning pain into quiet resilience. On their 5th bonding anniversary, as golden leaves drifted through the crisp autumn air in the private courtyard, Ronan stood by the flower beds Elara had cultivated, now a vibrant tapestry of color replacing old scars of violence. She found him there, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "Still, brooding over what might have been if that storm never brought me crashing through the gates." He turned, pulling her close with a rare, warm smile. "Reflecting on how lucky I am that you chose to stay, that we rebuilt this kingdom not through fear, but through the courage to be more than weapons." Their love had proven that broken souls could forge something enduring. Elara continued mentoring survivors, her work rippling outward to reform laws that once enabled suffering. Ronan focused on unifying the provinces with fair trade and protected routes, their combined efforts slowly erasing the last traces of Varian and Harlan's corruption. The people no longer whispered of the monster king, but spoke of the ruler who learned humanity through the Omega who refused to fear him. Yet challenges lingered on the horizon, as new whispers from distant borders hinted at old powers stirring once more. Chapter 9. As the seasons cycled through the rugged highlands around Stormville Fortress, Ronan and Elara's bond grew into something unbreakable, tested by the daily work of ruling a realm still healing from old wounds. They often retreated to the high observation towers, where cool winds carried the scent of pine and distant snow, reviewing reports of new trade agreements and the slow dismantling of lingering corruption. Elara's insight proved invaluable, turning potential conflicts with border clans into alliances built on mutual respect rather than force. One crisp evening, as frost rimmed the ancient battlements, they faced their deepest challenge yet. Rumors of scattered remnants from Varian's old network stirred unrest in the southern valleys. A group of former traffickers attempted a small raid on a protected haven. Ronan's first instinct was to lead a decisive strike with his warriors, armor gleaming under torchlight. "They only understand strength," he growled in the war room, maps spread across the table. Elara stood firm beside him, her hand on his arm. "And we show them a different kind of strength, one that protects without becoming the monsters they expect." Together, they devised a plan combining swift guards with offers of redemption for those willing to turn on their leaders. The operation succeeded not through overwhelming violence, but through coordinated precision and mercy that surprised even Ronan. In the quiet nights that followed, as they lay entwined in the East Tower chambers listening to the mountain winds howl outside, old doubts occasionally surfaced. "Sometimes I still see the 23 rejections in my dreams," Ronan admitted, tracing a scar along his forearm. Elara would press closer, her warmth chasing the shadows. "And I still feel the chains sometimes, but we chose each other through it all. That's what makes us different." Their partnership reshaped the kingdom in ways no one had predicted. Safe houses dotted the landscapes, laws protected the vulnerable, and the court learned to value honest counsel over polished lies. Children in border villages grew up hearing tales not of a fearsome monster king, but of the ruler who found his heart when a storm brought a brave Omega to his gates. On a quiet afternoon in the blooming courtyard where their story began, Ronan watched Elara tend the flowers she had planted years ago. She looked up, smiling as the sunlight caught her face. "We did it. We turned pain into something lasting." He joined her among the blossoms, pulling her into a deep embrace. "You saved me as much as I protected you. Together, we became more than survivors." The realm flourished under their rule, a testament to choosing partnership over power, trust over fear. Yet as new challenges whispered on the horizon, their bond remained the steady flame guiding them forward. Chapter 10. Decades of shared rule wove Ronan and Elara's lives into the very fabric of the realm. Their influence felt from the misty highlands around Stormville Fortress to the distant southern valleys, now blooming with renewed peace. The once isolated East Tower had transformed into a living heart of the kingdom, filled with maps of new alliances, scrolls of reformed laws, and the quiet laughter that had replaced years of heavy silence. Elara continued championing healing centers and education for survivors, her work turning former victims into strong voices across the provinces, while Ronan focused on fair governance that balanced strength with compassion. Their bond, forged in storm and blood, matured into something profound and steady. They still argued passionately in the council halls overlooking pine-covered ridges, but always ended with understanding, hands clasped under the table. Ronan learned to temper his warrior instincts with her wisdom, and Elara found safety in his unwavering presence without losing her fierce independence. Nightmares grew rarer, replaced by dreams of the future they were building together. On a golden evening many years later, as the sun painted the sky in fiery hues over the fortress, they returned to the private courtyard where their story had begun. Flowers flourished in abundance where rain and blood had once pooled on the stones, their petals dancing in the gentle breeze. Ronan stood among them, his frame still powerful, but carrying the quiet grace of a man at peace. Elara joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Look how far we've come," she murmured, leaning against his side. From a desperate Omega crashing through the gates in a storm to this, partners who changed everything. He turned to her, steel-gray eyes soft with deep affection. "You saw the man when everyone else saw only the monster. You taught me that being too much could mean enough for someone who truly understood. We saved each other that night, and every day since." They kissed slowly under the fading light, the same courtyard now a sanctuary of beauty and second chances. The kingdom thrived with stable borders, protected Omegas, and a court that valued honesty over fear. Tales of the reformed king and his unbreakable Omega spread across the lands, inspiring hope in those who once felt broken. Together they had proven that love was not about perfection or dominance, but about choosing each other through scars, storms, and everything in between. The monster had learned to be human, the survivor had grown whole, and in their union, the realm found its truest strength. Epilogue. In the peaceful years that followed, the private courtyard of Stormville Fortress became a living symbol of renewal amid the rugged highlands. Where violent storms and desperate blood once stained the ancient stones, vibrant gardens now flourished year-round, tended carefully by Elara's hands. Wildflowers swayed in the mountain breezes, their colors painting the space with hope and resilience, a quiet testament to how far the kingdom had come under their rule. Ronan often stood there at twilight, the golden light softening the harsh lines of his scars as he reflected on the long path they had walked. The 23 rejections that once defined his isolation now felt like distant echoes, replaced by the steady warmth of the woman who had chosen him despite everything. Elara would join him, her presence as grounding as the ancient towers surrounding them, her laughter carrying on the wind like a promise kept. "We turned darkness into something beautiful," she said one evening, leaning into his embrace as the sun dipped behind the peaks. From a hunted Omega crashing through the gates to partners who rebuilt a realm on trust instead of fear. He held her closer, his voice low and full of quiet wonder. "You saw the man when the world saw only the monster. You taught me that true strength lies in standing together, not towering above. We didn't just survive. We created a legacy where no one has to hide their scars. Their life together remained one of equal partnership. Elara continued guiding healing centers and protectorates across the southern valleys, empowering survivors to become leaders. Ronan focused on just laws and unified provinces, ensuring the old shadows of trafficking and betrayal could never return. They faced new trials side by side, their bond a steady flame through every challenge, proving that love born from brokenness could heal entire kingdoms. In the end, the monster king learned to embrace his humanity. The wounded Omega grew into her full strength. Together in the courtyard where their story began, they found home, not in perfection, but in the brave choice to see each other fully and stay anyway. The realm flourished, and their love became legend, a story whispered on mountain winds, that even the most scarred souls can build something unbreakable when they choose each other freely. Big shout out to Nightbond Narratives for bringing stories like this to life with incredible narration. Comment your city below and let me know what you think of the full story. Fire!